All right, let's get right into it. We are going back to 1177, to a battle that, by all rights, just shouldn't have happened. This was a moment where the cold, hard mathematics of war were thrown right out the window, leading to a victory so stunning that both sides were convinced it had to be an act of God.
I mean, just look at this number. 52 to 1. For every single Crusader knight on that field, there were more than 50 of Saladin's best warriors staring back. And let's be real, those aren't just bad odds. That's a guarantee of annihilation.
So that's the big question, right? The one we're going to try to unpack here. How on earth does a dying teenager, leading a tiny force of 500 men, manage to absolutely crush a veteran army of 26,000? I mean, how is that even possible? To really get how this all went down, you've got to look at the two guys in charge. On one side, you have a living legend at the absolute peak of his power. And on the other, you've got a boy king whose own body was in open rebellion against him. Just take a second to look at this comparison. It's almost unbelievable. You've got 16-year-old Baldwin IV, so sick with leprosy he couldn't even feel his own hands. And he's facing the legendary Saladin, a military genius in his prime, ruling a massive empire. The power imbalance isn't just huge, it's laughable, at least on paper. And it wasn't just him. His entire kingdom was falling apart. Baldwin's so ill, his face is hidden behind a silver mask. His hands are wrapped up. And meanwhile, his nobles are literally packing their bags and fleeing Jerusalem. Secret talks to just give up were already happening. No one was betting on if the kingdom would fall, they were betting on when. So you've got this scene, right? The war council in Jerusalem. The enemy is basically at the gates. And the dying king makes a call, a decision that everybody in that room, and honestly, any general looking at it today, would call completely, totally insane. You know, his council is freaking out. They're telling him run or surrender. But Baldwin, who's so weak they have to carry him into the room, he tells them all to be quiet. And with this one statement, he just changes the entire vibe. This wasn't going to be about survival anymore. This was going to be an act of pure will. And the plan they came up with? Wow. It was just bonkers. This isn't strategy, you know? It's basically a suicide mission. To march your tiny, bone-tired army straight into the mouth of a lion that's 50 times bigger, it's just nuts. That march must have been absolute hell on earth. It's brutally hot. Knights in full armor are just dropping from dehydration. Some are even hallucinating. And leading them is the king, who's in so much pain his body is convulsing, and his men have to physically hold him down. Just imagine that scene. But here's the twist. While Baldwin's men are going through this nightmare, their legendary opponent, the great Saladin, is about to make the biggest mistake of his entire life. And it all came down to a single, very simple, and very human mistake. Yup, overconfidence. Saladin was so sure he'd already won that he stopped thinking like a general. For him, this wasn't a battle anymore. It was more like a parade. So he lets his huge army just spread out. They're scattered for miles, looking for food, just chilling. He thought the war was already over. And everything his scouts told him just made him more sure of himself. They told him Jerusalem's walls were basically empty, which was true. So Saladin thinks, aha, the Leper King is hiding in his castle. He just couldn't imagine, could not wrap his head around the idea that this kid would do something so unbelievably crazy. And so, here we are, November 25th, 1177, near a place called Montgisard. You have a massive, scattered, overconfident army about to run smack into a tiny, exhausted, but absolutely fanatical force. The collision is going to be epic. They literally have to tie the dying king to his horse. His body is giving out on him. But his mind was sharp as a tack. And he sees something Saladin's brilliant military eyes totally miss. The ground isn't as flat as it looks. It's full of these hidden ravines that could turn a simple retreat into a slaughterhouse. What happens next is it's just mind-blowingly fast. Seriously. The charge kicks off at 2 p.m. By 2:15, just 15 minutes later, an army of 8,000 professional soldiers is starting to break against a few hundred guys. By 3 p.m., even Saladin's own elite bodyguards, these are men sworn to die for him, are running for their lives. The battle just collapses into a rout, and then the rout turns into a massacre. And you know what really tells the story? It's how the other side described it. The Muslim historians writing about it. They couldn't explain it in military terms. To them, the only possible explanation was that God had literally abandoned them. This wasn't just a loss, it was a spiritual crisis. So, the actual fighting was over in just a few hours. But the consequences, the ripples from this one battle, they would completely change the game in the Holy Land for the next 10 years. Just look at these numbers, they're insane. Saladin's huge army, the biggest, baddest force in the whole region, was basically wiped off the map. It just stopped existing. And in one afternoon, the nearly bankrupt Kingdom of Jerusalem not only saved itself, but grabbed enough money to pay for its defenses for years.
Yeah, let that number sink in. 10 years. That's how long it took Saladin to scrape together another army that was even close to as good as the one Baldwin's tiny force destroyed in under 3 hours. An entire decade. So what did all this mean in the long run? It meant they bought time. Precious, unbelievable, miraculous time. It let the Crusader kingdoms rebuild, get new weapons, build new castles, all because of one impossible afternoon. But you know, maybe the most telling thing about all of this comes from Saladin himself. Years later, after Baldwin finally died from his illness, Saladin wasn't celebrating. He actually acknowledged that the one man he feared more than any army on the planet was gone. Baldwin was only 24 when he died. He'd spent 8 years after that incredible victory basically defending his kingdom from his deathbed. And here's the real tragedy. Just 2 years after he was gone, Jerusalem fell to Saladin's rebuilt army. The kingdom that he saved just couldn't hold on without him. And that leaves us with this one big question, doesn't it? The Battle of Montgisard is this incredible reminder that sometimes things like courage, sheer willpower, and unbreakable belief can count for more than thousands of soldiers. It really makes you wonder, in the end, what's more important in war, the math or the morale?